Today's class focuses on a big problem for ostomates, leaks. We all get leaks from time to time, so what can we do to stop them? Today I'll cover leaks 101, why they happen, and how to anticipate them. I'll also explain how different ostomy products can help prevent leaks. And then finally, we'll dive into different common reasons why you might have a leak and how to manage that. I want to take a moment to introduce who we are. We are Better Health, and we are a new type of medical supply provider. We take a holistic view of your healthcare journey. So what that means is not only do you get ostomy supplies from us, you also get educational resources like these classes. There's a member exclusive benefit about coaching that you can do one-on-one, where you can talk about overcoming specific challenges you may be having. And then finally, we have a team of product experts who do a great job of helping you find your way to the products that are gonna be working best for you. So if you're interested, feel free to call the number on the screen, click the link in the comments, and get started. I'm Siobhan. I have an ostomy myself, so I'm a great resource for leading these classes. I really know what it's like to have leaks, to have blowouts, to have problems with my barrier sticking. I've been there too, and so you're not alone. Let's dive into leaks 101. Why you want to avoid leaks? Well, it seems like an obvious question to ask, but there are some really good reasons that you want to avoid leaks. First of all, products are really expensive. Ostomy products are really expensive. So you want to make sure that you're only using the amount of products that your insurance will cover. Otherwise, if you need to order more products, you'd have to pay out of pocket for those. It can get expensive. The extra changes you're doing to manage your leaks interrupt your life. There's a million other things that you could be doing rather than feeling uncertain and unsure and uncomfortable that you're going to have a leak soon. And then the most important reason is that output is bad for skin. Output is acidic, whether it's urine, whether it's stool. And so if it gets on the skin, it can cause all kinds of issues. Let's get on the same page about what a leak is. So a leak is when output is able to get under the barrier and onto the skin. There's different levels of leaks, let's call them. There's a little bit. So it's very normal when you're changing your barrier, if you're pressing on your abdomen, you're activating your stoma and there might have a little output dribble out and that gets under the barrier while you're changing. Totally normal, and it's not usually a big cause for concern because your barrier will absorb that output. Now we have a different level of, whoa, it's a continuum, right? You need to change your barrier now if you see a lot of output underneath the barrier. If you're experiencing any sort of pain, itchiness, you don't want that output sitting on the skin and causing skin breakdown, and you don't want to be uncomfortable. So definitely if you see a lot of output under the barrier, change your barrier right away. So there are a couple of main reasons that leaks happen. One of them is about poor adhesion between the barrier and the skin. And this can happen for a lot of reasons, and I will go into those in full detail in a little while in this class. Another reason is that you have poor barrier fit around the stoma. So your barrier may be sticking just fine, but the opening that's surrounding the stoma is not quite right and it needs to be adjusted. There's too much moisture. So if your barrier becomes oversaturated, meaning it's absorbed all the moisture that it's designed to absorb between maybe output and your skin sweating, then it's going to stop working and you're going to have a leak. And then body shape and stoma shape. The shape of your body and your stoma is really going to affect how well your barrier does its job. And you should find a barrier that works for you and not try to just make it work with one that only kind of sort of meets your needs. The good news is there's a lot of things that you can try to help with leaks. But until you get those leaks under control, here's the pro tip. Make sure that you keep an emergency change kit with you while you're out and about. So that means a little travel pouch that includes extra products like extra barriers, extra ostomy bags, paper towels, maybe some baby wipes, and definitely some trash bags to throw your ostomy garbage away in. So let's talk a little bit about how to prevent leaks. And preventing leaks starts with understanding that there are a lot of ostomy products that can help you manage and get ahead of any potential leaks. The first are barrier sprays and wipes. Now, a barrier spray or barrier wipe is just it's a chemical layer that you lay down on your skin, and it serves two purposes. One is that it provides a good surface for which to which the barrier can adhere to, but it also protects the skin. I like to use a lot of like home maintenance metaphors in my classes because a lot of people have experienced them. And barrier sprays and wipes do the job of a primer when you're painting a wall in your house. So you want to start with a good surface to apply your nice expensive paint to. You don't want to try and cover up old stains. You want to make sure that the paint sticks the way it should. So that's what barrier sprays and wipes do. You can't tell that you've laid it down often, but it's there and it's doing its job. Now, if you are experiencing a lot of moisture, if you're living in a humid environment or you're sweating because you're super active, there's a good way to help prevent too much moisture from saturating your barrier too soon. And that's a product called a stoma powder. Now, all of these products that I'm mentioning, they're you don't have to use them all together. It's sort of a mix and match. Incorporate the ones you want and skip the ones that don't help. Now back to stoma powder. Stoma powder is just a basic powder. You apply it under your barrier, you dust it on your skin, and like I said, it's really great for helping absorb some extra moisture under the barrier. Pastes and barrier rings or sheets are like caulking in your bathroom. So if you've been in your bathroom lately, you've noticed that where the tub meets the wall, there's probably a bead of caulk that forms a waterproof, flexible seal, and it keeps the moisture from getting in cracks and causing mold to grow or causing rot to happen. So pastes and barrier rings and sheets do the same job. They're basically the same product, just in different formats. You can use paste around the stoma. You can lay down like a bead of paste. It's okay if the paste gets on the stoma. You can also use a barrier ring. It works basically the same way, but you do have to kind of massage it to fit around the shape of your stoma. Some people prefer to put the barrier ring down first on the skin and then apply the barrier over it. Or some people will choose to apply the barrier ring to the barrier itself and then put the whole thing down. It's up to you. I encourage you to experiment and find what works for you. There's no one right way to do this. So the number one thing for creating a good seal for preventing leaks is that barrier. The goal of the barrier is to protect the skin, but it's also to keep output moving out of the stoma and down into the bag. In a perfect world, we'd all have these nice flat bellies and our stomas would be protruding, meaning they're kind of outy, they stick out, versus like say any stomas that retract. So a flat barrier, if you're lucky enough to have a fairly smooth, uneven surface where your stoma sticks, a flat barrier is a great option for you because it does what it says, it's just flat, it warms up, it sticks on the skin. Now, if you have what I described is a retracted stoma or an innie stoma, like some people have innie belly buttons, or you have a short stoma, sometimes you need some help getting that stoma to stick out and away from the skin. Otherwise, the outputs just kind of pool around the stoma. So the option that you have for that is something called a convex barrier. All of these products are made by all of the ostomy manufacturers, so you can go between the different major brands. There's Coloplast, there's Hollister, there's Convatec, there's Security. Better Health sells all of these brands, and we can help point you to one that would work for you. A convex barrier has a little bulge, and by putting this bulge around the stoma, it helps the stoma stick out. There are different levels of convexity. So some stomas just need a little help and a little bulge, and some stomas really need a lot of help, and there's a deep convexity option. So if one convexity isn't working for you, definitely try out a different level of convexity. Now, some people might have a hernia, what's called a peristomal hernia. And a peristomal hernia happens when, if you can imagine, after surgery, or during surgery rather, The surgeon cuts into your abdomen and pulls the intestines out and folds it back, creating the stoma. When that happens, there's an incision in the abdominal wall. The muscles are cut open. A hernia happens when after surgery, those muscles don't knit back together very well. They aren't as strong as they once were. So they allow the internal organs, maybe some of your intestines or something else, to poke out and create a bulge. Peristomal hernias can happen over time. They can get worse over time. So make sure that you're paying attention to a hernia. Bring it to your doctor or your medical provider's attention. And if you do have a hernia, it can be challenging to find a good ostomy product that can conform to that round. If you've ever applied a Band-Aid, say, to your knuckle, if you apply it, around the edge and you straighten it, then, that barrier doesn't sit on there very well. But there's a great product out there. It's made by Coloplast, and it's called the Convex Flip, which is a funny way of saying concave. I have an example here, and this is a convex flip. What happens is that, usually people cut the hole in the middle, they put it on their stoma, and then when they're applying it, voila, the barrier conforms to the shape of the stoma really nicely. So that's a great option if you do have a a hernia. Now, another great thing that you can do to prevent leaks is make sure that you are following a good application process. So often we discover that people have come out of the hospital and they don't have the right education about how to apply their barrier. And the reason often is not because because when we're in the hospital, we're taught how to do these things, or our caregivers are taught how to do these things. But then, that information goes in one ear and out the other because we're in stressful situations. It's hard to learn things when you're recovering from surgery, you're in pain, or you might even be on heavy pain meds that make it hard to learn anything. So that's why we're here. Start with clean skin. So you want to avoid lotions, body washes, baby wipes, oils when you are cleaning the skin around the stoma during a barrier change. And the reason is those products can contain ingredients that interfere with barrier adhesion. Next, when you apply products, you want to apply them in a specific order. So skin barrier and a spray wipe. You can use some stoma powder to help create a crust if you're experiencing some skin irritation. And I'll explain in a little bit how to create a crust. You can use the paste and barrier rings to create that waterproof, flexible seal. And then finally, your ostomy barrier. Now, again, these products are mix and match. If you are not needing them, you don't have to use them. There's some pro tips for you. Use a blow dryer to make sure you get that skin really nice and dry. 20 seconds, low setting. You don't want hot setting. You can also use that blow dryer to help warm up your ostomy barrier. And the reason that I suggest that is that heat helps activate that adhesion in the barrier, the adhesive materials. So you can use the blow dryer. You can also use a heating pad to help the barrier start to relax. And the reason I mention this is because sometimes barriers are very rigid and they don't flex. So by using a heating pad, you're kind of getting it to bend into the right shape, and that way it'll have an easier time sticking to your body. Avoid vigorous activity for an hour or so after you apply your barrier. You want to give that barrier, the materials in the barrier, time to set up and get working. And then avoid changing your barrier right before sleep. I've noticed that I always have a problem when I change my barrier right before bed. I suspect it's because I'm moving around and creasing that barriers in ways that don't allow it to really adhere to the skin evenly. Now, one last note about applying products is that you want to make sure that when you're applying products, that if you have skin creases, folds, you create an even surface for that barrier to apply to. You're not trying to, get that barrier to fit into a little crevice. So that's what you can also use the the barrier paste or the barrier rings. They can act as not only a flexible caulking, but also a surface evener. How long should barriers last? Barriers should last 2 to 4 days. If you're lucky, you might get wear extending to 5 to 7 days. It's all about how long your barrier lasts is also all about your skin, your stoma location, your weight, whether or not you have a fold when you're sitting down, and who doesn't have a fold when you're sitting down. And those all affect, when you'll need to change your barrier. However, if you're having daily changes, it can be stressful and it can signal a problem. You're going to be going through those ostomy products more quickly. You might be getting close to running out, and that's a problem that that's a situation no ostomate wants to be in. So, check in with your medical provider or your wound care nurse if you are going through barriers really, really quickly. If you're a Better Health member, we do have this ostomy coaching program. I mentioned it before. It's an exclusive member benefit, and you can talk to a peer coach for half an hour and, try and identify and troubleshoot specific issues that you're having. All right, so let's get to the real meat and potatoes, common problems and what's to do with them. So problem number one is that you notice output under your barrier. You're probably saying, Siobhan, that's what we're talking about all along. True. So if you see output under your barrier, the signs are, there's discoloration or there's intense itching or pain. Sometimes the causes of that output under the barrier, generally it's a leak, but specifically speaking, it could be caused by output pancaking, meaning the output that you have is very dry and it's creating kind of a flattened pancake that fills up the top portion of the bag and doesn't fall down into the bag. So it will be all up around here. So you want to increase your hydration. That can often help with pancaking. You can reduce gas-causing foods and drinks. And the reason that I suggest this is that when you have a pouch full of gas, it puts stress on the barrier, and that gas is going to help the barrier want to move away from the skin and weaken the connection between the skin and the barrier. So you also want to check to make sure that your stoma and your barrier fit are correct. So your stoma is something that you need to measure every once in a while, especially after surgery. Our stomas are changing as our bodies swell or stop swelling, and all of your products should come with a stoma measuring card. This is one example. It's from Hollister. And it has these holes. So what you do is you just put the holes around your stoma, and you try different holes until you find a hole that sits very, very closely around your stoma, usually about 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters. And then that's what you cut your barrier to. There are some numbers on here, but it's hard to see. And then finally, it's quite often the case if your barrier is not fitting right, that you're not centering the barrier opening around the stoma. And that can happen very easily, especially if you're using a one piece, because you can't see as you're putting the barrier on that it's right around the stoma in the right place. And if you offset the barrier, that's more skin that's exposed. That's a potential problem for leaks. If that's the case, I recommend trying a 2-piece barrier system. And what a 2-piece is where the barrier and the bag come separately and then connect together. So when you can put the barrier on, if you have a 2-piece, you can imagine that you can get it right centered around the stoma and then attach the barrier, and then everything's hunky-dory. Blowouts. If you've never had a blowout, you are the luckiest ostomate alive, and tell me your secrets, because I've definitely had a blowout, especially at night, and it's no fun to wake up to a mess if you're sleeping. I suggest investing in a really good mattress pad. It'll save you a lot of tears and trouble. And then additionally, if you have the budget, get a second mattress pad. So if you're changing in the middle of the night, one can go in the wash. You can put a new one down in case something else happens, and you don't have to interrupt your sleep and be worried about your mattress being destroyed. Blowouts happen to so many of us. It's just gotta laugh about it, and who better to laugh about it than people who have experienced it. Avoid foods that are going to be really gassy, like cauliflower and onions, beers and carbonated beverages. You want to eat your last meal earlier on in the day, and the reason that I suggest this is with when your digestion is happening, especially if you have an ileostomy, it's happening very quickly, right? So you may see your food again just a few hours later. So if you eat your last meal earlier in the day, there's a chance that some of it's going to already be passing out through your stomach into your bag, and you'll have less output in the middle of the night. On to incisions, belly buttons, and bulges. So the reason this comes up is that sometimes it's hard to get that barrier to stick over uneven surfaces. And quite often, if you have an ostomy, it's likely you've had previous surgeries. So one of the things that you can try is to experiment with different barriers. Different barriers, they all look very similar, but they can act very differently. Some are more pliable, like, where's my one piece here? Some of them are very, very flexible, and some of them are not very flexible at all. So it may be that you have a better result with a very flexible barrier than with a more pliable, than with a more rigid one. And how do you know how to find these barriers? When you call your medical supply company, and again, Better Health, we can advise you on these. Your medical supply company point you in the direction of what barriers might be a good fit for you. You can also trim your barriers. There's no, as I said before, there's no one right way to do it. So up here on this barrier, you could actually trim this little tape part. I wouldn't trim into there's a darker section here. It may be difficult to see, but the darker section is really where the barrier protection is. So you could trim little notches out here in the edge of the barrier. You can do the same for, this is called an acrylic barrier. You can do the same for a hydrocolloid barrier, which is doesn't have that Band-Aid tape on it. You can also rotate your barrier. I have a stoma that's very close to my belly button. If I try to put my barrier on so that it is the long oval point, this is actually the type of barrier I use, the long oval is oriented this way. It covers up my belly button and causes me no end of problems. It basically glues my belly button shut. But if I rotate my barrier 90 degrees, I still get the full coverage of the barrier. It just doesn't overlap my belly button. The only drawback here is that I couldn't use the belt loops because they're oriented the wrong direction. But I've had tremendous success just making a little adjustment to how I place the barrier on my skin. Finally, barrier extender strips, they usually look kind of like half moons, or even medical tape, can be really, really helpful in getting that barrier to lay down over really uneven surfaces. Excess moisture. So as I mentioned before, barriers are only meant to absorb a certain amount of moisture before they really stop doing their job. And the signs are, the barrier goes from this translucent to a very kind of opaque state, and the barrier is kind of loosened around the stoma. Oftentimes, excess moisture is caused by skin that's too wet from sweat or from the environment, or if you've been swimming, that can shorten the life of your barrier. And I also get as a question, people want to know if it's okay to go in the bathtub, to go in the pool. It's absolutely okay to wear your ostomy appliance into a bathtub, the pool, the ocean. I have been surfing and boogie boarding and boating and kayaking with my appliances with no problem. So if it's something you love to do, I highly encourage you to go do it. If you're experiencing too much moisture on the regular, you can dust stoma powder onto the skin. So I mentioned the stoma powder earlier, and it's a product that's made to work with the barrier adhesive materials, so it shouldn't interfere with your barrier adhesive. So say you're experiencing poor adherence to skin, and that's a common problem leading to leaks. So it's hard to get the barrier to stick to the skin, or you're having those frequent changes, or the barrier doesn't feel secure. Sometimes it's not you. You're doing everything right, and it's the products, which can be very comforting, at least to me. What you can do is make sure that your products are not expired. There's a way to check for that on the box that your products come in. They should have an expiration date printed, usually on the edge of the box, on one of the shorter edges. products that have been stored in an environment that's too warm or too humid. So storing your products in a bathroom is probably not ideal unless you don't have any other place to store them. And the reason is that humidity helps them break down sooner. So if you can store them in a closet that's dry and cool, that's the best place to store them. You try a different barrier, especially if you're getting poor adherence to skin. Just for whatever reason, your skin may be reacting to the barrier, to the ingredients in the barrier, and they just don't play well together. And then finally, often we have body hair that's going to interfere with the barrier sticking. You can shave that body hair. You can wet shave it, dry shave it. Just proceed after you've shaved it with drying the skin and applying your barrier is normal. All right, I've been talking at you for a while, so I have a few key conclusions and key takeaways that I want you to remember. Even if you don't remember anything else, these are the things I want you to know. Yeah, check your barrier often. Sometimes we lose nerve feeling in our bellies and we may not experience irritation. The sooner you notice a small leak, the more prepared you'll be to change it. Be prepared, especially in early days. Have your emergency change kit with you if you're away from home. So as I said, not only does it include the extra products, it can also include a change of clothes. Ensure that you have the right barrier and the right fit. Don't be afraid to experiment and try different products. It can be a little intimidating to try different ostomy products because if a new barrier that we're trying fails, then we have a mess on our hands. But at least we also have some knowledge about what doesn't work. And then finally, be aware of the environmental factors that affect barriers. So it's not just sticking something on the skin. There's humidity, there's motion, there's stretching, there's, the hernia bulges, or maybe there's some cavity. All of these things can play together and make it challenging to get a good barrier fit. So just keep that in mind as you are doing your own application processes. So thank you for joining Better Health's Ostomy class on leaks. If you want to become a member, feel free to call that number on the screen, click the link in the comments below, and you'll get connected with a membership advisor. And we'll see you in the next ostomy class.